and self-directed approaches. Okay, that's the question. So, was that this way with you all?
Are we?
You are good to go your life.
Are we able to do?
Oh.
This is part of this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you a brief video of a family that we support in Massachusetts because I think telling the stories is the most, from my point of view, is one of the things that's really important to expand self-direction. So, ready? Yes.
When you're walking Lindsay Foley, but that doesn't get in her way. She lives in her own home. Excellent job. Don't miss anything. She's a high school graduate, and 5 days a week she's out in her community working as a volunteer with her job coach.
All right, I'll can you hold it for me?
Yeah, I'll hold it.
All right.
Okay, great. It works like this. With funding from the state, Lindsay and her family created a program and hired a staff that specifically focuses on Lindsay's interests and needs.
When we first started coming here, you needed me with you all the time, and I didn't know.
Lindsay Foley is an example of self-direction at its best. Lindsay is fully engaged in the community she loves and is developing job skills and independence while enjoying a full and interesting life.
It's a wide open opportunity, and there's no design that is set. You can really be creative with this. So if families are interested in being creative and taking part in the details of everyday life, I so encourage them to look into this opportunity.
You're awesome.
No, you are.
My point is this, to expand the momentum and to grow, we need to figure out how to get the stories out there. Because once you tell the stories, and I've told these stories to people in government, to people in business, and once you ask them, so if you had a family member or friend with a disability and they needed services, and I explain what self-direction is, and I say, isn't that what you would want? And they look at me like I'm an idiot. Of course this is what we want. There's no other way to get services. So I think for me, the part of the momentum is we've got to figure out how to tell the stories. We've got to figure out how to get other people to tell the stories. We got to get very creative about it. I mean, this is where the All Blacks play. The All Blacks should be sponsoring self-direction. We need to figure out how to get the word out there because once people get it, it's not an argument. It's not a cost argument. It's not a benefit argument. It's an obvious choice.
You're 3 minutes, 5 seconds.
I'll talk fast. Sorry. I'm Lori. I'm from Cures New Zealand Family Cures Alliance. So respectively, I guess, our families in Mana. And just want to thank Manu Nui and Marsha for asking me to be a panelist and to have that voice today. And to support the comments of all the presentations we've heard over the last few days, which has given all of us a lot of things to think about, and it's also been very affirming. Self-direction is being driven by the people who want it. I hear this at every forum and event that I attend. It's accelerating. I feel like that. I don't know what you think. And the same messages are coming through on the boards that I'm part of. And while it's largely a call to action from individuals, it's coming from providers as well, thinking how do we fit into the world of self-direction. It's challenging, but the ones that I talk to are interested in how they can transform to support and be part of self-direction. And also from NGOs like mine and from proactive government officials and politicians who get self-direction and want to support it. For self-direction to gain the momentum we're all ready for it to have the future we all see, every part of the system is going to have to dive in and trust, which is something that's come up a lot today. We can't let fear of making mistakes slow self-direction. We owe it to ourselves to test the boundaries of self-direction as individuals, families, taxpayers, government agencies, and governments as a whole. And to accept that every person has the right to make their own choices and to make decisions we might not make, but supporting that right to choice. I want to take this opportunity, can't resist taking this opportunity, to say that part of self-direction is choice for disabled people and families about funded family care. After so much human rights action and social and political debate, the funded family care payment was introduced 3 years ago. It's a hard payment to get. It forces an employment relationship on people with disabilities and their primary family supporter, someone who's probably had to decide between their own paid employment and assisting someone they care about to get funded family care. Not enough people get this payment, only a few hundred, not the scary numbers that were put forward during the years of human rights action. It's not well promoted, and it's hard to not think this is deliberate as a cost-saving measure. That's not something I say lightly, but recently, when we were assisting with revising the government guide for CARES, the single resource every family care should have to find out about available government support, funded family care was not initially included in that core resource. And CARES New Zealand had to argue that it must be included or we would not continue to promote it or feature our 0800 number on the back cover. This is not right, it's not New Zealand. Although funded family care has been reviewed and some changes implemented, it must now be looked at by government and by New Zealand. Is it fair? Do enough people know about it? Does it support the self-determination of people with disabilities and their families and give them choice about how employment of a family member is done and who is the employer? So our call for this conference is for funded family care as a tool and an important choice of self-direction to be better promoted, to work better for those who use it, and to be broadened despite the urgent legislation that closed down the possibility of other New Zealanders to have the right to seek payment for an intensive role of care. I especially make this call on behalf of women. 2/3 of family carers are women, and at a time when we're debating raising the age of retirement, many women are not able to participate in paid employment or save for retirement age or make it to the current age of retirement because they have made the choice to earn less to support a loved one. So many supports and benefits are not accessible to spouses, most of whom are women in this area, and most, it's archaic and absurd that in an age when most women work and need to work due to high living costs, think Auckland, think where we are right now, they have the right to use their experience and qualifications and contribute to the economic well-being of their families. So I will leave that with you all, but we don't hear much these days about funded family care. It needs to improve, and we need to all be part of making that happen. Thank you.
I did have a picture, so it's terribly important points, putting a picture up. My thought was really just, maybe it's a kind of slightly nerdy thought, but it's about change and policy change. I think in this area follows this thing that's sometimes called the innovation curve. And so I have a kind of version of that, which I'm hoping is helpful, because I think one of the things that's important is your strategies have to evolve, and that's one of the challenges. In the early days, these kind of innovations, and New Zealand's kind of already through this territory, you've already proved it can work because you've got people out there doing it. Anna Winuni is doing it. You've got those kind of numbers, you're there. So some of us do that stuff, and it's under the radar. It's important to respect it and build on it, but you're kind of already through that phase. The second phase is when you kind of you start communicating about it. I found one of the key strategies for us was to outmaneuver the government. I think we're kind of trying to do that too successfully in New Zealand, but we basically got everybody talking roughly the same language in a way that basically the politicians were on our side, the leaders in local government were on our side, and the last ones to crumble were the civil servants, who were the fundamental block. Sorry to the servants in the room, but that was my experience in England anyway. So it was very much about getting that story that Mark's talking about, but really, in a sense, a little bit through the sector, disabled leaders, families, and professionals. The third phase is, I think, quite interesting, because let's be optimistic. I think you might pull this off quite quickly and be moving into this third phase in New Zealand if some of these political changes come through. Now, I think in a funny way, the third phase is very much about making it easier, making it more natural, making it the default at a technical level. So the kind of systems that Manawanui create do that, try to help that. But I think it's a big role for some service providers to want to do this, to want to do it well, to really provide the flexibility that people and families want. And again, there are service providers in New Zealand doing this now, but can you really focus on celebrating and supporting them? Because not everybody is going to want to do all the technical stuff. You do need some folk who can come in on the inside of the story and not left out in the cold. That's part of making it easy. The fourth bit of the journey may seem a bit of a dream, but I just make this point really. I mean, when we start talking about mental health and other areas, we're seeing this play out. There comes a point when it becomes so natural that really good innovation disappears. And actually you kind of want to aim for that. I know it sounds really weird and you wouldn't be worrying about it in the short term. But it does enter into questions. And in fact, the last point, your point talked, about equality, income levels, basic rights. As you start to look at other aspects of the welfare system, this system itself might need to change or even disappear, because actually, in a decent, wealthy society, which New Zealand is, why would people have to jump through all these bureaucratic hoops? Why wouldn't they just be wealthy enough to resolve these things themselves? There's no reason for this. A lot of disability support is about adapting to a badly adapted society. So, in our dream world, at least, we should be thinking about beyond that.
Okay, well, one of the things that I've been working on, many others have been working on, is really the fact that people aren't going to get self-direction because they're in settings that don't permit self-direction, don't permit individual funding. And we have to unpack those settings. We have a huge amount of money locked into models we don't want, that were conceived of 50 years ago, and it acts as a drag on what's possible. So we need to, if you like, we need to do a service model transformation, where we take a group and congregate segregated models, cash them in, liberate the people, give the people the money that's been liberated, and start all over again, one person at a time. And that, of course, has lots of technical challenges. And the good news is lots of agencies and governments have been quite surprised by how doable it is. So I think the question is really, are we going to ramp it up? And I think the best way to ramp it up myself would be to have targets. Each year a certain percentage of those models would be reconfigured and the money repurposed. And of course that just increases the supply of resources for individuals, but it gives individuals that are looking for what they're going to do when they get out of these places. It's a kind of the best way to kind of expand, and it's quite dramatic because, I think once people get the idea you can blow up these models, it just might get popular. And we want momentum, and I think a lot of happy people create a lot of momentum. I'll leave it at that.
I haven't got self-direction here. I've got Michael holding the microphone, so he's empowering me now. I think the big issue for me is valuing people, and one of the things I've heard a lot over this time that we've been here is actually valuing people. And I'm sorry I'm going to criticise your video a little bit, and not a lot, but because I think it's really good. But one of the things, and Bill English pointed out this morning, is that people want employment. You can go anywhere you want, and people say they want paid work. And it's one of the major issues that we have, is that we're the highest unemployed group in the Western world, basically because we're not valued as people. And when I see people going to university, it's starting to get a bit better now, but they all go into the social services. We want to be counsellors, we want to be social workers. We don't want to go into industry and become managers, because that's the area that people push us into, because that's the nice, fluffy area that people can go into to become social workers. Sorry for any social workers out there. I trained as one, so I'm saying it from experience. But I think if we started valuing people, and I think it starts with the providers that we've got in this country that are providing services to disabled people. They don't employ disabled people. They have able-bodied people, and when they've been asked, a lot of the services, and I'm not saying all, but a lot of them say, oh, we can't employ people because they can't do the jobs. So if we've got the agencies that are supposed to be there supporting us, saying that they can't employ us, then how are we going to go out to the community and expect the rest of the world to value us as people? So for me, it's really important to actually look at valuing people, and then we can start looking at individualised funding. I was involved in the beginning when Needs Assessment Service Coordination came along. Paul Curry and I sat and worked that out, because the government at the time wouldn't give us individualised funding, and I'm talking 30 years ago. So that was our first attempt at it. And we've come a long way. But when we hear stories of individuals that can't get things, and it's very focused on their particular needs, it doesn't help often. So we do need to get together as a group, but we also need the providers. There's a lot of them out there. It's $1.2 billion spent in the sector. So there's a lot of providers that could actually start employing more disabled people and start pushing the envelope of what disabled people can do. And with the individualised funding, we can actually do our own thing. I've had it since before it was fashionable, because none of the services were touched because I kept complaining about them all the time. So the government gave me the money because it was easier to shut me up rather than trying to get me to fit in their box. And I'm really proud of the fact that we've come so far with it. So that would be my thing, is to stay to value people.
Thank you, Barry. Well, we've heard the 5 candidate statements, and I think you all agree there's a lot of wisdom there. Now it's the opportunity to tap into it. So let's have some of those questions. We've got a Nations of the roving mic lady. What questions have we got? Or even clarifications on things that have been said? Or other ideas, as Mark might point out. Yes, ma'am?
And I'm with Progress to Help, and we're based from Taranaki through to Waikato, Tokoroa and Taupo. So we go right through the middle there. My question was directed at, is it Barry? Kia ora, Barry. So as a training social worker in a community support facilitator role / individualised funding navigator, my question would be, I think a point of difference for Progress to Help is we look to our whānau that come to us as employable. We have one young gentleman by the name of Timothy Faulkner, if anyone knows him. He lives with autism, and he actually runs a lot of our peer support groups, and he is amazing. He's taught me so much with just what he knows at such a young age. He's just come off the Hamilton City Council youth group. So we also have a lot of my colleagues have come from lived experiences. So we're actually a mental health and disability organisation. So just about everybody in our organisation has some degree of disability or have experienced mental health. So my question actually is, why don't providers employ disabled or people who have experienced mental health? Because it seems pretty natural in Progress to Help.
I think the big issue is the resourcing of people, because disabled people have been institutionalised for so long. Education is a new thing, and when I say new, it's only happened in the last 10 to 15 years, and people are being pushed into the social service area rather than the management area. And a lot of organisations, you've got to remember that the social service industry in New Zealand started out with a charity model, which was give us the money and we'll look after the people. And so that model's starting to change, and there's a lot more providers that are changing away from that, but it's taking a long time, and I think a lot of providers don't see. I remember my first job in Palmerston North was with the New Zealand Disability Resource Centre, and I was to bring clients to Palmerston to get assessed, and the staff said, well, you can't do it because you're disabled. What about confidentiality? Because you're the same as them. And so basically, they thought that because I had a disability, I couldn't be confidential. After a few months of me being there, they would change their minds. So it's a mindset, and I still believe it's out there with a lot of providers, that they can't see past their noses, that actually bringing disabled people into their organisations adds value. Like I run our organisation, so from right as CEO and owner of the company right down, we have 25% of our staff are disabled as well. But it's hard to find people that are with disabilities that have the level of education that's needed because it's just not being funded.
Anyone else? Okay.
So yeah, I just want to quickly clear something up from my own mind. So what we're trying to do here is to get everyone with a disability and mental health onto IF. Is that what we're trying to do it away from the ID services, residential housing, and things like that? Is that what we want?
What's that phrase?
I guess what New Zealand wants to do is New Zealand's business, not English business. But I mean, I offer you the thought that what you really want to do is help people have meaningful lives and lives of love and lives as citizens. That's the goal. I think if you give yourself a short-term goal, do what Michael describes, close down the old system, put people with disabilities in control of their own lives, and convert the existing services and supports into things that are really useful for people and that people use when they want them. And yes, institutional, congregate, residential care. I don't see the case for it. Never have. Most of it I would imagine would disappear.
Gary.
No, it's one.
Just as one. Oh, that's it.
I think that as disabled people, along with young people, very weak, we need to tell our own stories to each other, and I think that that's where the practice of whānau comes in. We've talked a lot about the principles, but the practice of whānau training each other, whether we be Māori or not Māori, I think we need to tell us the stories to each other. We need to acknowledge we have some tools that are really useful, and we have our own tools that are also really useful and make the system easier, I think, than people are told. So I think the stories we tell each other are really important, and I think we need to congregate rather than segregate to do that. So that's a comment.
Just one of my own concerns, but I wonder if there's a kind of element of fear of failure. This is one of Michael's presentation about the good life. The reality is, things go wrong. Disabled people, able people, people from Mars, things go wrong. And we need to accept it, and it's okay when people fail. We get around, we pick them up, and we send them on their way. And that's probably one of the great problems that fear of failure. Well, people failure is good. You learn from mistakes. No mistakes, no learning. Question? Thank you.
Lawrence Chong from Palmerston. The last 2 days we are talking about self-direction and control. In New Zealand, we have IF, EIF. This morning, Bill English was saying, I heard that statistic, 2014, 3,000 on IF, EIF. Today, 3,000. Well, my question is, what's happening? That is only 10% of 32,000. We are not moving. There must be something wrong somewhere here. But I can, at the moment, we are willing to pay bureaucrat supported living, $35 an hour. Individualized funding, EIF, $25 an hour. Simon, you said this morning, in UK, dropped 40%. Here we are slapped 28.5%. I think in Australia, you're a little bit lucky. I mean, there are a few pockets of family governance. I mean, in Brisbane alone, we have 3, Kalpana, we have Home West, we have Lifestyle Supported Living. I think they have been in existence for the last very family driven family collectives. They have been around for 25 years. I mean, they are in control, but they work collectively. My question is, we are being slapped as family from the word even before it goes. I'm not criticizing Manawanu in charge and all that. I mean, they got it from the system. But the transformation for family, you have to be the employer, you have to be the bookkeeper. Here you are, we are prepared to pay $35 contractually to service provider. Here you are, family, you have been slapped, shortcut, you have been shortchanged for $10. Okay? So where are we heading to get quality, self-direction, in control? Thank you.
One more bit on that.
Let me say one thing. I can't speak to the pace of change in New Zealand, or the politics of New Zealand. Let me say that this is, and I know some people have been doing this a long time, but this is a whole new industry that's being created. It's being a totally different industry that's being created. And the 3,000 or so folks that are doing it now, that's only been over the last 6 or 7 years, 10 years. Okay. But it is a whole new industry. And as I showed you the other day in the States, I mean, we've been doing this in the States for 13 years nationally. And you know, it's growing. I mean, it has to grow. It's not growing, it's a big problem. But it's a whole new industry. And even to, you know, we talk about transforming residential, the whole residential industry. That's a big deal. So you should absolutely be impatient. You should be annoyed. There's no question about that. But it will take more time than you think.
So, I mean, I think one of the key points you're making is spot on, which is, and this happens a lot internationally, is you pay a huge price for taking control. Systems, in a sense, it's naturally part of the system. If you imagine that basically this is not a rational system, it's a system that doesn't want to do something good, and it makes doing something good expensive. And one of the ways it makes it expensive is it says, well, if you're going to take control, we're going to slash and burn what you get. We've had the same thing in the United Kingdom. If you take a direct payment, which is one form of individual budget, you get a lower value one than if you don't. It's crazy, isn't it? One of the successes we had was, for a while, it's kind of gone away, but for a while we had systems of budgeting, resource allocation, which kind of cleared that away and said, this is what you get given your needs. Now you figure out what level of management and support you want. So that technical issue, and that's one of those kind of, when you break through, and this isn't the thing that's stopping you, what's stopping you is the politics, but when you break through that, then that kind of issue is worth fighting for in the kind of clean-up process that can take decades of saying, well, hang on a second, you know, if we're going to do this extra work, why are we being penalised for doing all the extra work? Which is what it boils down to. So you're spot on, basically. It is a common problem, though, and it's a result of a system that doesn't want to do the right thing.
So I've been really careful to try and keep my opinions to myself, but I want to weigh in on this one. Because I think you're right, Lawrence, I'm the ultimate impatient person when it comes to self-direction. That's why we're here. But I have to say that Barry is absolutely dead right. We've come a long, long way. I've just got the actual from the horse's bones percentage of where we're sitting right now with individualized funding. So the eligible population, and that's important to keep in mind, it's not everybody with a disability, should be, but it's not currently, that's eligible for IF. Of the eligible population, which is people with home and community support services, the 27.7%. So that's huge compared to very on discretionary budget, what, 11, 12 years ago. Yeah. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, that we do make progress even though it's slow.
I'd like to add, though, that part of this is an advocacy challenge. That think of the example of Scotland, where they essentially have legislation that says if people want it, they can get it, essentially. And a lot of places don't have that. They don't have the ability to claim that they have a right to this. And so that would be very helpful to have a lot more legislative support for it. Secondly, though, you can, without breaking the bank, you can have targets for expansion of the pool of people that can take advantage of it, fiscally. But you have to commit to a certain kind of growth rate in the targets. Otherwise, governments really aren't sort of coming to the party. The targets lock them in to some kind of committed action over time. And again, in the absence of targets, what do you expect them to do? They're off the hook. So we got to get them back on the hook. And it's not speaking against government, it's speaking to the kind of operationalization of the concept that would give us a bit more confidence that we could gradually get it into the hands of a lot more people.
There's another thing that I want to add, is that we're on the tip of the iceberg when we talk about individualised funding. How many people here have had their bathrooms modified or had vehicles through the government that we should be getting individualised funding for? I know when I did my bathroom, I was told I had to have a specific person. The assessor came and did my assessment, and then I had to have a specific builder to do the alterations, and then he wouldn't go along with what I said to him and had to do it myself. So we're not even talking about major funding here, we're only talking about personal care, home individualised funding for be able to manage ourselves. So we've got a hell of a long way to go before we get to the point that I believe that we should be at, which is being able to have a level of funding that means that we can get the things that we believe are right for ourselves.
Let me add one thing. I think other people have said this, but let me say it and take it in a different direction. This is, from my point of view, this is not about funding. It is about funding, but it's not really about funding per se, because it is changing the industry and changing all the incentives in the way funding is delivered. Because it's not, and we heard this yesterday from several people, including Simon, this is not about more money, this is changing. Massachusetts 2 years ago did pass a law. There's a law in Massachusetts now, as you probably know, in the DD system, that says that anybody who wants an individual budget can get an individual budget. It hasn't gone through the roof because the system doesn't want to change. The case managers don't want to do it. The providers don't want to do it. You are changing a whole system, and it's going to take a lot of work to change the whole system. But it's not just about funding. It's about people's attitudes. It's about what they learn. People don't like to learn to do new things. Professionals don't like to learn to do new things. So it's a big deal. And that's why I think, in a simple way, telling the story to people who have power, whether they're in government or they're in business, makes a lot of sense because they get it immediately. Because they're not ingrained into the old system. It makes perfect sense to them. They'll be on your side right away.
More education. We had a question? We have? Yes, thank you.
I was just thinking about, in terms of getting disabled people into work, if there was going to be how, in terms of focusing energy on changing the preconceptions of people in the workforce that would be looking for that employment, because I feel like it's quite easy to see when you work with a disabled person or have experience with someone, you realise how much they had to offer, but when you don't have that experience, it's a little bit harder.
You did right, and I think that I never used to be for quota systems, but I like some countries that have a quota system that get the ball rolling, so you get people into employment and then they can start employing more people. But again, it comes back to stories. I think we need to see success stories of people that are in employment. The attitude awards are a good start where they have the employment award, and I know that some of the people have been really promoted that have employed disabled people and see them as value. So, you know, it's that, again, getting back to advertising and promoting people that are in employment, and it's done really well for them.
I want to add my 2 cents with you. I think it goes right back to young people actually, and that comes down to the word expectation. If we don't have an expectation, people will rise to that. If our young people in schools, there's an expectation, white, black, pink, disabled, non-disabled, will achieve their potential and be supported, they will grow into that. If at a young age, they're taught that if they want to be a computer scientist or an entrepreneur or whatever, it's possible, they'll grow into it. So there's a role there for the greater community, mums, dads, nanas, poppers, etc., to embolden the youth, that they can be what they want to be. And going with that is role models, and acknowledging and promoting role models so that young people go, he, she did that, I can too. That's my message.
Can I just add to that, because one of the problems I have is that, like I've done okay with my life, and we have in this country the tall poppy syndrome. So as a person that's done okay, I get the amount of disabled people that give me shit about it because I have stuff that they don't. And it really is, it's really hard because I've gone out and done it for myself, but I get lambasted by my own people because we have a tall poppy syndrome here that says that I shouldn't be able to do that.
The trouble is that the tall poppy syndrome applies to everyone. So in actual fact, you've achieved. You're being cut down.
I have 2 questions for you. And I've been thinking about this over the last few days. Have you ever thought about doing an individualised funding overseas exchange for disabled people who want to go overseas and work for companies?
So take the individualised funding and live overseas.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't think of an example of that. I mean, it's quite a breakthrough for us when people have taken what was respite funding and been able to travel and go and do that. And so we have, and actually in some of the communities in the north of England where I come from, there's a lot of folk with from whose family is still in Pakistan or Bangladesh or India, and they will fund ways in which people can go back and spend a long period of time with families. So there is some flexibility in the English system in good places, but it is one of those areas where actually also you can get terrible practice and real lack of freedom because those rights that would enable that are really still too fragile. And England is another place where it's not even, it's actually a bit stronger than you could choose a personal budget. If you're in eligible services, it is a personal budget. That's the only system in town. But how that personal budget, the flexibilities and the rules, it's a bit like the city, remain things that will take advocacy to get right. So I haven't heard of anything quite as good as that yet.
I don't think I heard quite. It's about an exchange. So someone with individualised funding in New Zealand exchanging some individualised funding in the UK, the US. So it's like an exchange student.
Yeah. And they go overseas and work for a couple of years over there, and then they come back and see what they've been over here. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and we're not there, but it's a great idea. I'll bring it home.
The second question is, if a disabled Prime Minister were to take office today, what would you expect to see by the timing his terms in office with the disability system?
Oh, first thing easily, the all able-bodied people, we told how to spend their money and what to do. And what's your thoughts on that? That's a great question. So, if you were Prime Minister, how would you, what would your first change be? Yeah?
If I could just say that there are people that have their money overseas overseas, they're called banks, and the 1%. And because they have their money overseas, we don't get to tax it. So we don't have the money to pay for individual budgets. And so a little bit of macroeconomic reform, like the 1% paying their share, would give us a bit more wiggle room here. So a little commercial for a rethink on that level.
I think mine, actually I just take for granted that the whole social and healthcare system would be modernised and people would have control. So I'm just not even asking for that because I'm not even said that. But I think the basic income, personally, is the key reform for lots of areas. Your minister was talking about people being incentivised into work. Well, it may be you're doing that beautifully, but in England, when I gave my talk, I was talking about the increased suicide rates for a programme that the language is the same as your minister used. So I'm not very encouraged by that sound, to be honest. Basic income, which you could start, actually, I've argued that disability benefits would be a great area. If you didn't have the confidence to introduce basic income immediately, introducing it around disability would be a great way forward, because you could then just say, right, well then you take all the means testing out, people have got their money, and then they can go and work or do anything else they want to do. So I would say actually that part of the benefit system, in my experience, is one of the most damaging things for lots of people, including but not just people with disabilities. So that's why I change.
Any other things?
Yeah, well, I'd make all the all the government cars accessible.
Just as we bring it to a close, I want to put a challenge to our 5 panel members, and I think they'll all struggle with this, so I'll give them a couple of minutes to think about it. I want them to finish with one word that goes towards maintaining momentum. So I'll give you sort of 30 seconds to say to think about it. Quick 30 seconds. Who wants to go first? One word. Just one word that goes, that adds their question. How to maintain momentum. One, Beata. One.
Fun.
Fun. Excellent.
Hope.
Love.
I think I choose fire.
Fire. Excellent.
Change.
Change. Now, one of those words I think it requires artificial listening. So I'd like to thank our panel very much. We've got gifts. Woohoo, we've got gifts for you.
This looks like one hell of a party.
So thank you very much. So just while our panelists are just leaving the stage, just some housekeeping matters before Marsha finishes off. You do have got evaluation forms in your bag. Please, please, write on those good as well as recommendations, because we want to know we've done well.